as summarized by one diligent 9/11 inquisitor, professor of philosophy and religion at Claremont School of Theology, David Ray Griffin. NORAD should have had fighter jets intercepting this plane by 8 hours 53 minutes. And by this time, being 7 minutes after the first hijacked plane had hit the World Trade Center, the fighters certainly should have been ready to shoot down this second hijacked plane if it did not immediately follow standard intercept orders. Instead, however, no planes intercepted Flight 175, and it crashed into the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. 5 days later, on September 16. Vice President Dick Cheney, appearing on Meet the Press, claimed that the authority to intercept and/or shoot down commercial aircraft was a presidential-level decision. Notably, as Griffin adumbrates, the vice president's comment conflates two commands into one. Similarly, on September 13, General Richard Myers, then acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee. After the second tower was hit, I spoke to the commander of NORAD, General Eberhart. And at that point, I think the decision was to start launching aircraft in both these instances. Top-level officials indicate that the order to intercept hijacked planes resides only at the highest levels of command. Yet this testimony contradicts standard operating procedures long in place and documented regarding incident of hijacked planes or otherwise unauthorized flight patterns, whereby a chain of authority has been instituted for interception, beginning with the Secretary of Defense, with the exception, according to military regulations, that if the Secretary cannot be located, then others in the subordinate chain could so claim authority to avert loss of lives and/or great property damage. Among the recommendations issued by the 9/11 Commission report, the following stands out for present purposes. We believe the 9/11 attacks revealed four kinds of failures in imagination, policy, capabilities, and management. It is therefore crucial to find a way of routinizing, even bureaucratizing, the exercise of imagination. Within a document more than 500 pages long, only 14 pages are devoted to explicating this call for imagination. Another 68 are dedicated to explicating, among other initiatives, the repetitive summons for unity of effort across various security and defense intelligence domains, closing with a call to organize America's defenses in the United States. Copious explication is dedicated to explaining why defense intelligence must bridge domestic and international authorities, blessing, 3 years after the fact, the formation of patriot legislation and related administrative initiatives that have so profoundly altered cornerstones of American civil liberties. Notably, across these 500-plus pages of ardent and grave commentary, there is no rigorous examination of how it was that not one, but reputedly four commercial aircraft could be permitted to veer so fatefully off course without interception, including within a zone of air defense surveillance over the Pentagon that is second to none on Earth. 4. Nor is any verification derived from General Myers or Vice President Dick Cheney upon what basis they claimed NORAD intercept authority could have been so muddled and delayed that fateful day, killing nearly 3,000 civilians. Scores of related and troubling matter within the holographic state would emerge shortly after 9/11, circulating the internet over the past several years, some of which has made its way into published journalistic accounts. This non-academic inquiry calls for the rather more prosaic and perhaps also courageous praxis than the imaginative inquiry the 9/11 Commission report so gravely summons. Due diligence that can square, among other disparate claims of fact, the two following strands. A. Standard public administrative operating procedures, rehearsed, documented, and carried out scores of times each year. With B. The probabilistically implausible, comprehensive failure of NORAD to respond according to procedure even after the first World Trade Center tower had been hit. the prosumer of, and yet it moves. Notwithstanding a murmur of published scholarly inquiry, a foreboding silence shrouds these matters across academic venues, silence that is nowhere more astonishing than in the aftermath of scholarly due diligence by Brigham Young University physicist Stephen Jones, a hitherto lifetime Republican, voting for George W. Bush twice, a well-respected and published materials scientist and beloved teacher with no personal history of previous political activism, whose research inquiry into 9/11 reveals indissoluble material evidence from dust samples obtained shortly after the attacks that the towers were imploded and exploded, not pancaked. Jones's inquiry of these samples finds the chemical equivalent of thumbprint evidence for the presence of explosive and metal melting compounds throughout the debris at Ground Zero. This evidence, combined with extensive and corroborated eyewitness testimony from Ground Zero of rocking explosions prior to and following impacts, as well as undisputed materials science, including the virtual impossibility of diffuse fire substantially diminishing structural steel strength, all powerfully suggests that the World Trade Towers 1, 2, and 7 could only have been felled by internally placed explosives administered with extensive access through security clearance and with the best demolition expertise available. For his studious efforts and judicious request for peer review of his various inquiry into 9/11 contradicting the official pancake theory of the tower's collapse, Professor Jones eventually found himself compelled to accept early retirement by Brigham Young University and refused peer review by any extant academic journal. Jones's inquiry into dust samples from 9/11 does not propose any sort of new or controversial science. Rather, Jones calls merely for the application of science where its impartial métier seems so gravely warranted. It is, rather, the official pancake theory of the tower's collapse that whistles up new science, claims that ought, therefore, to elicit immediate, scientifically rigorous and peer-reviewed tests of steel tolerances in the interest of public safety around the world. No such tests meeting the canon of scientific rigor have anywhere been carried out. There will be no dearth of gainsaying the what if and why not disputations about 9/11 into the foreseeable future. The Vice President's comments mentioned above will be repeatedly disavowed as taken out of context. The mysterious non-responsiveness of Nora that fateful day will likewise be explained away as a failure in routine communication transaction, and so on, ad nauseam infinitum. As if so many indistinguishable grains of sand passing unnoticed through an hourglass, matters of utmost relevance to the American polity, not to mention world affairs, have garnered circuitous inquiry at best, much less the kind of administrative imagination the 9/11 Commission report itself so gravely called for now 5 years ago. Like the ominously, dreadfully silent Senate chamber on the eve of war in Iraq that Senator Robert Byrd would disparage in his Senate floor speech of February 12, 2003. Likewise is the case for American public policy and allied scholarship in matters pertaining to the utmost relevance for our time. Not to mention the profound disavowal of still-burning, molten questions originating at 9/11 Ground Zero gone begging by the American media. No conspiracy needs alleging for such inquiry to initiate. Allegations neither before the fact nor any other incendiary rhetoric are necessary for fact-finding to play its judicious course in this matter. The official commentary on 9/11 reveals glaring gaps and not a few bright-line contradictions. But our intentions in this symposium are to step back from these matters to attempt imparting coherence across an arcing, holographic drama denoted by quizzical ellipses and grave implications, as which 9/11 poses us. The articles assembled here are intended to delineate the long shadows and also intricate crevices and fissures denoting current American behavioral conditions, dilemmas and challenges bearing the imprimatur of still begging, troubling questions left by 9/11, but which extend at least as far back as we. Like the molecular thumbprint evidence available from Ground Zero, the imprimatur not only of 9/11, but scores of other shocking incidents in the shadow of American world dominance has proved extraordinarily elusive. Empiricism revisited you, pliant intelligentsia, were the dead. Theirs, the worker's destiny, was the future. But you could share in that future if you kept alive the mind as they kept alive the body, and passed on the secret doctrine that 2 + 2 make 4. George Orwell.